You know, it's a real blessing to have Brad back with us today, and Jennifer too, but mostly Brad. I know y'all had to work, and one had a wedding at the coast, one had a wedding in the mountains they had to work with. Thank you, Windows, I appreciate it. But it's good to have y'all back with us this Sunday. And boys, we'll see y'all in a little bit. Y'all behave, be good. Jones means business and take his jacket off. I'll behave too, but okay. Oh, mercy. So, if you got your bulletin, I want you to do me a favor. And some of y'all do this. I know some of y'all look. And I had planned to preach on this well before last Sunday. I don't know if y'all know this or not. I usually try to plan out the sermons, at least the passages, and look at the general theme about a month out. So this past week, I kind of finished up in November. I even started on December because Christmas is coming up. But I plan to talk about this topic well beforehand. But I want you to look at this as how we're doing. I want you to look beside this as general fund. Our offering last Sunday was $835. And I know for a fact, I didn't look through all the envelopes, but I know for a fact that one person gave $300 of that. I want to talk about tithing today. This is one of those Sundays, it's Pastor Appreciation Sunday, excuse me, but you may try to run me off afterwards, okay? And the joke goes that the most Baptists have the same meal on church after church on Sunday, and that's roast preacher. So here's roast preacher for you. But, you know, I grew up in, amazingly, a teenager in the late 90s, and I've noticed things about rap music. Now, I'm not a big rap music fan. I don't listen to it on a normal basis. You don't see me driving down the road thumping the bass and the music and stuff like that. But I notice there's a trend. A lot of rap music in different eras talk about money, about the rings, the bling, so to speak. Y'all know the kid lingo, the bling, okay? The rings and all the jewelry and the chains and the money, the Benjamins, if you will. In fact, there was a song probably 20 years ago called It's All About the Benjamins. It's all about the money. You know, we as a church are not in it for the money. We're not doing this for the money. We're not a profit. We're in this for God. But sadly, to do the work of God in this community, to do the work of God in this world, organizations need money. So it's not necessarily all about the Benjamins, but sometimes the Benjamins do factor in. So we're going to talk about tithing today. We're going to talk about what is tithing. We're going to talk about how Christians should give. But I'll show you a cute little video first to start us off with, okay, if I can get this to work. Cross your fingers, eyes, and toes, okay?
What you got there, Christian? Oh, I just have the latest in broadband, smartphone, touchscreen technology.
You lost me.
God bless you. You see, with just a couple of touches with the finger here, I can call people, I can check my email, and I can even read the Bible on this little didgeridoo right here.
Funny, it doesn't look like a didgeridoo.
Oh.
Never mind. Let that thing set you back.
An insanely unspeakable amount of money that would make you jealous and blush if you ever heard $600 come out of this mouth.
Wow. You know, I'm surprised that a super Christian like yourself can afford something like that.
Huh?
I mean, you know, a believer, you give money back to your God, right?
Yes.
I mean, right? Because you believe in His work and want to see it happen here on earth.
Yes.
In fact, you know what? I just noticed the other day. I never noticed it says, "In God we trust." On our money. I mean, that's why you give back to Him, because you trust Him, right?
All right, I see what you're doing. All right, that's just quite enough, okay? Quite enough, all right?
What are you doing?
Trying to make you disappear and through this conversation.
I don't think it does that.
Well, it should do that.
So how much do you give? I mean, is it a set fee, like a membership fee, like each year you have to pay so much, or?
We are supposed to tithe 10%, all right? The tithe is 10% of our income.
Oh, okay.
So what about you? What good do you do in the world with your 10% of your income?
Well, I'm not religiously bound to a certain percentage, you know, but I do what I can, you know. I get 2 weeks vacation, so I take one of them in the Dominican Republic where I help at an orphanage. I wish I could do more, but I do what I can because I feel, you know, obliged to do so, you know.
Right, I see what you're doing. I see what you're doing. That's really good. That's really good. You do all that for the world, right? I got you. Okay, and I give 50% to my God.
Well, I mean, it looks like you just did.
Okay, that's quite enough. All right, quite enough.
That doesn't work.
Really, really should. I can't get a signal.
You know, we as Christians should be different than the world, shouldn't we? Sometimes we're not. Friends shared some statistics the Barna Group had collected recently, and things like tithing, giving, outreach, and care for the poor, things like that. And some statistics show that we Christians are much different than those who are not Christians, and that's sad. But let's talk about tithing. What is tithing? Believe it or not, now, y'all can double check me on this. Believe it or not, the Bible has more to say about money than prayer, faith, or salvation. Would you believe that? Jesus, especially Jesus, has more to say about money. But the Bible in general has more to say about money than prayer, faith, or salvation. You know, you could speculate why that is, but I wonder if maybe it's because God knew that our stuff, our things, our money would be one of the biggest struggles we as humans would have. He has more to say about it because He knows that we would struggle with it. I mean, we have problems with it. We live in a country where debt is through the roof. I have a lot of student debt, trust me, I understand. We don't worry about money. Our national debt is high. Trade imbalances. Money is an issue. But what is tithing? You see, there are a few passages I want to share with you. Let's talk about it bit by bit as we go, and I'm going to ramble a little bit. Bear with me. Psalm 24:1. The earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants belong to the Lord. You see, one of the things we need to acknowledge about money and our stuff is that everything belongs to God. We may think we have X in the bank account, or we have this nice big house, or small house, or no house, whatever, car, but it belongs to God. It ain't ours. Everything on this earth belongs to God. Proverbs 3:9-10. Honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first produce of your entire harvest. Then your barns will be completely filled and your vats will overflow with new wine. You see, God promises to take care of us. Now, there's some of these preachers out there that say God wants you to have joy, God wants to bless you. God does, but He promises to take care of us. Not that we're going to live in some big old mansion that God promised us on earth. Made in heaven one day, but God promises to take care of us, what we need, based off of what we want. See, one of the problems in America today is we often confuse our wants and our needs. You know, that's one of the things I notice with my children a lot of times is they confuse wants and needs. I need that new Nintendo video game system. No, you don't. But the more I think about it, the more I realize I'm just as bad as they are. I need that new cell phone. The one that's got all the bells and whistles on it. I need that new car. I need a bigger house. I need this. I need this. Not needs, but wants. But what is tithing? Since everything is God's, a portion goes back to God. Now, Leviticus chapter 27. How many of y'all read Leviticus every day for your devotions? If you raise your hand, I'm going to call you crazy. I love Leviticus. It's good. And once you get into it, it's very theologically rich. But my wife tells a story when she took Old Testament introduction in college, how pretty much Leviticus done her in for the rest of the semester. And she shook her head, yes. But you look at Leviticus chapter 27, from every tenth of the Lord's produce, or land's produce, from grain from the soil or fruit from the trees, belongs to the Lord. It is holy to the Lord. If a man decides to redeem any part of this tenth, he must add a fifth to its value. Every 10th animal from his herd or flock which passes under the shepherd's rod will be holy unto the Lord. He is not to inspect whether it is good or bad. He is not to make a substitution for it. But if he does make a substitution, both the animal and its substitute will be holy. They cannot be redeemed. So essentially what Leviticus is telling us is that the principle was set up in the Old Testament. Now this is good. So he doesn't have necessarily money like we had back in those days. but 10% of the goods were to go back to God. Everything belonged to God, so a tenth of the sheep, a tenth of this, the grain, whatever, went back to God. It supports God. Now back in the Old Testament days, even in the tabernacle days, that offering back into God, well, a tenth, it went to support the Levites and the priests. The Levites and the priests didn't have time to go out in the fields to work and to raise animals like most people would. So they were too busy doing the work of God, so they needed a portion of the proceeds to help them live. But not only that, but the 10% went to support different charity endeavors of the community. Those widows, the poor, the orphans that needed it. Went to support. So the tithing principle in the Old Testament set up so as a portion of what we have that God has let us borrow goes back to Him to support His work in the community. So a tithe is at least 10% that goes back into supporting God. Now, I'm going to cause a bit of controversy here. I'm going to ask this question. I'm sure you may have asked it before. Are Christians required to tithe? There are some denominations, a certain sects of Mormons, that require you to tithe. It's almost like a membership fee, I guess you could say. You have to pay your dues to be in good standing with the church. Now, I do not look at the financial records of this church purposefully. I don't see how much you give. I don't know how much you give, whether you give or you don't give. But imagine if those were public record. Are Christians required to tithe? The short answer to this question, are Christians required to tithe, is no. We're not going in behind you. We're not checking out how much you give, how much you put in the offering plate, how much you don't put in the offering plate. I don't check that. But in general, Christians are not necessarily required to tithe. You see, like I said, the law of Moses mandated tithe to support the Levites and their priestly service, and support the foreigners, the orphans, and the widows. I mean, Deuteronomy 14, 28 and 29 talk about that. At the end of every 3 years, bring a tenth of all your produce for that year and store within your gates. Then a Levite who has no portion or inheritance among you, the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow within your gates may come, eat, and be satisfied, and the Lord your God will bless you in all the work of your hands that you do. So God set this up. Now, that's the Old Testament. There's really nothing in the New Testament that tells us how much to give. There's no 10% quotient set out there. And since the Old Testament system, the Levitical priesthood, has been done away with, the notion, the principle of the Old Testament tithe is gone. Now you may say, preacher, now hold on a second. The New Testament talks about giving. Yes, it does. But there is almost nothing in the New Testament talking about tithing. But let's think about that New Testament a little bit. Since we're Christians, we live under this New Testament, this new law that Jesus gave. How are we supposed to give back to God? How are we supposed to give back? Here's a few principles I want us to think about. Believers are to give generously. 2 Corinthians 9:6. Remember this, the person who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and the person who sows generously will also reap generously. If you're busy sitting out there asking, God bless me, God bless me, God bless me, there's people out there that want a huge blessing from God. God bless me. But you're not giving back to God what He's already given you. You're just being greedy. You just treat God like Santa Claus. Santa Claus, give me, give me, give me. Give generously. I know sometimes it's hard to give. I know sometimes we think we need more. We have to keep some to live, to go. But I often think about that story in the Gospels of that widow who gave her mite, all that she had, essentially. These Pharisees were giving only a tenth of their income. They were tithing that portion. But this widow gave all that she had. She gave freely from her lack. Where these others gave a portion of their abundance, she gave all that she had. She gave generously. Not grudgingly, she gave generously. Believers are also to give humbly. Jesus chastised the Pharisees for giving a tenth of their spices while neglecting more important matters of the law, such as justice and mercy and faithfulness. Over in Matthew chapter 23. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You pay a tenth of mint, dill, and cumin, yet you neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faith. These things should have been done without neglecting the others. When we give humbly back to God, not necessarily following some rule, but give generously and humbly back to God, we're putting God in His ultimate place. We're saying, God, you are God, you're in control, and we are just your servants. To suppose that God demands a 10% and nothing more can foster an attitude that says, this bit is God and the rest is mine. But the sad thing is, are you going to take it with you when you die? No. If you ever can find a hearse with a trailer hitch, let me know. You know what that proves to me? You can't take it with you. It ain't yours. Our houses, our cars, our bank accounts, our investments, whatever we have that may be of some value, it ain't ours. We're just borrowing. It's like with our kids. I love my children to death, and they're ours. I mean, you look at them, you can tell they're ours. And they act just like us, whether for good or for bad. Jonas eats like me, and Elias is hard-headed like me, and Jonas and Elias both are cute like their mom. Did I see my dog last night? She rolled her eyes at me. But even though they're our children and we're raising them, we're borrowing them from God. We have been entrusted with them to raise them to be good Christian people, good Christian adults hopefully one day. We're borrowing them. My truck, even though it's got over 2,000 miles on it, I'm borrowing it. I'm borrowing it for the long haul. But I'm borrowing it. And whatever I can do in service to God with that, I'm doing. My bank account may not be burgeoning, but whatever I have in it is in service to God. We're to give humbly and we are to give generously. But believers are to give with a proper attitude. You know, I hear this question every now and then. People ask this question. This is being very nitpicky. Do I tithe 10% of my net or my gross? Do I tithe only off my take-home pay? Do I tithe before insurance and retirement deductions? What portion do I need to look at to figure out how much to give my 10%? If you're asking that question, or if you've asked that question before, guess what? You need to rethink things. You don't have the proper attitude. We need to give what we decide in our hearts to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion. For as 2 Corinthians 9:7 says, God loves a cheerful giver. Each person should do as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or out of necessity. God loves a cheerful giver. If you're like me, you ain't got much. Most of y'all know you don't have much. Most of you live on fixed incomes. I think most of you, if somebody was really hurting, you'd really open your pocketbooks. I praise you for that. I thank you for that. I'm so blessed. You are good to me. But we must remember that we must support the efforts of God and the work in this community. We need to give generously, humbly, with a proper attitude, cheerfully, if you will. Here's some admonitions about tithing we find in the New Testament regarding giving and tithing. First off, that giving is an act of stewardship. Now, to remind you, we don't own anything in ultimately God's eyes. It's all His. We're just put in charge of it. Now, we looked at last Wednesday night the story of the creation of man and Adam and Eve in Genesis chapter 2. You know, and we asked the question, did Adam name the animals? Well, we noticed that act of naming the animals was an act of responsibility and control over the animals. God had placed creation under human control because ultimately God needed a steward to watch over it. God didn't need it, but God put a steward in control of it. Adam was borrowing it. We're borrowing what we have. We are just stewards. You know, we got to give it back one day. We need to take care of it. So the stuff that we have, the things we have, the money we have, it's not ours, it's God's. And we must be responsible with it. 1 Peter 4:10, based on the gift each one has received, use it to serve others as good managers of the varied grace of God. We also need to remember that when we give back to God, whether it be our talent, our time, our money, the giving is an act of worship to God. Think about how we have our offering and collect in our service. It's not at the end, it's not at the beginning, it's near the middle of the service. Because we're giving back to God, we're worshiping Him. Worship, now, I've talked about this a little bit in other sermons, other times in Bible studies, but think about worship. Again, it's us focusing on God. Putting ourselves in the back seat and focusing on Him. When we give back to God of our time, of our talent, of our money, we're worshiping God. That's saying, God, it's yours, you're the boss. It's all about you. Not me, not my selfishness, not me having the latest gadget and doohickey. That's for me, because I love the latest gadget and doohickey. It's about you. Romans 12:1. Therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, I urge you to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual worship. You may not have a lot of money, but you know what you can do? You can serve. Volunteer and help the church out. I jokingly talk about a lady in a former church. She couldn't tithe much, but she could. She worked at one of the liver mush making places over in Clinton County. She'd pay the preacher in liver mush. If you could pay me in liver mush, that would be great. But giving should be proportionate. 1 Corinthians 16:1, now about the collection for the saints, you should do the same as I instructed the Galatian churches. On the first day of the week, each of you is to set something aside and save in keeping with how he prospers, so that no collections will need to be made when I come home. Another admonition about Christian giving here, it should be voluntary. When you give to God, it shouldn't be because somebody's making you do it. If you were ever to come down this altar, if you did, if you have, whenever, you come down this altar and somebody makes you come down and pray the sinner's prayer and to ask Jesus in your heart, somebody makes you do that, that's not sincere, is it? Which, by the way, this time of year when there's those hell houses you see, you know, people they try to scare you into salvation. I think a lot of times that's too big of an arm twist to try to scare somebody, to make somebody get saved. I don't like that. I don't want to make you give back to God with your time, your talent, your money, but you should want to do it voluntarily. It's your choice. Hey, this is America, right? It's a free country. We should choose freely to give back to God. There's a few passages there, 2 Corinthians 9:35 and 2 Corinthians 8, 1 through 5, and so on and so forth. But giving should also be planned. You shouldn't be willy-nilly whenever you want to do it, but it should be a regular type of thing. You know, there's some habits in this world that are not good habits. Some things we do on a regular basis are not necessarily good things. And I'm the type of person I like regimented things. That's just the way I do. You can ask my wife, I'm a little too bad when it comes to regimentation and schedules and things. But there's some good habits to get into. Good regular things. And one of those things is tithing. Giving back to God. Maybe you can't do it every Sunday. Maybe when your Social Security check comes in once a month, or when your paycheck comes every other week, or what have you. Make a good habit of it. There's one person in this church who's not here today, so I can pick on them. They have an automatic draft out of their bank account sent in every month. That's a good thing to do. It's a good thing where if you forget about it, you have a schedule with the bank, they send it in for you. Hopefully that person won't be overdrawn, but oh well. Giving should be cheerful. We talked about 2 Corinthians 9:7. Giving should be generous. Not begrudgingly, but generous. You know, I don't have a lot of worries. I try not to worry about a lot of things. I'm not really a worrier. But one of the things I've started a habit of doing, I worry so much about, is every Monday, because I don't look at the numbers on Sunday. Like I said, I don't look at the financial giving records. I don't even ask really who gave. That's none of my business. But I've gotten in the habit about every Monday of asking Renee, when she's here on Mondays, asking Renee, our secretary, say, Renee, how was offering? Was it good or was it bad? And it breaks my heart sometimes to hear it. When I saw the numbers, and she told me the numbers that are printed in the bulletin now for this past Sunday in the offering, I cried. I cried. Because like I said, I found out, I know that almost half of that was given by one individual. I cry because it makes me feel like I'm doing a bad job as your pastor, as your minister, and also I cry because I worry about this church. There's a lot of churches closing their doors, and I don't want this to be one of them. One of the things I've tried to do as pastor is try to be responsible for how we spend our money. I grew up as a good young Republican one day, and I was always taught fiscal responsibility. Be responsible for what God has given you. And I try to do that as a pastor in this church. When decisions are made, I try to make sure that we're trying to be responsible for what we give and strategic in how we give things and do things. I try to be responsible, and especially here lately, we've tried to really watch what we spend because I'm worried about the status of this church. We've got a little bit in the bank. I don't want that to be some sort of cushion. Because there's a lot of good we can do in this community to tell people the good news of Jesus Christ and tell them about the cross and tell them about how God loves them and Jesus died for them. And some of that we can do for almost no money. But some of the good in this community that we do requires money. And I hate talking about money. I'm not the type of person who loves talking about money. I don't leave this quote with you. I'm not a Methodist, nor am I a son of a Methodist. I did attend a Methodist seminary for a little while. And I come to respect John Wesley. John Wesley was the founder of Methodism, essentially will become Methodist. He was a well-regarded man and had a lot of good things to say. Here's a quote from him. Maybe something we Baptists can learn. Give all your money to God. You have no pretense for laying up your treasure or laying your treasure upon earth. As I said earlier, if you can find me a hearse with a trailer hitch, let me know. It's all God's money. He's entrusted us with it. It's all God's stuff. He's entrusted us with it. Our time on this earth, it's all God's time. He's entrusted us with it. And what He asks is us to give back a portion. Give it generously, give it humbly, back to Him in service to Him. Now these numbers, the bulletin, I'd love to see those change. If you have any guilt, I want to be the Holy Spirit speaking to you, not me. But not only the numbers in the bulletin, but in our activities. Come Halloween, if you're able, come on out. Give of your time back in service to God. If you're able to volunteer in the schools, especially with our 5th grade class, give of your time in service to that. Serve God that way. There's a lot of talent in this church. Maybe some of your talent can be put to use in service to God in some way. What do you give back to God? God has blessed us in so many ways. Whether we think we're the poorest of the poor or richest of the rich, whatever, we all have something we can give back to God because He's entrusted us so much. Give all your money to God. You have no pretense for laying up treasure on earth. Don't give it to me. Well, I'd like your money. I'd like your liver much. But don't give it to me. Give it to God. Give your time, give your talent, give your money. Next month, I told you I plan a month out using sermons. And I've got 2 Sundays planned in November. Good Lord willing, Creeks Don't Rise. That's our plans in Nice and right? To have 2 sermons before Thanksgiving to think about not necessarily our money, but our society. Things about contentment. Things about entrusting God with what we have. Some things to think about. This is kind of the kicking the tires a little bit to think about that. as we ramp up the season, and I'm going to write my newsletter article for the next newsletter is going to be about this if I ever sit down and write it. But I'm just frustrated with the stores, the big box stores. Even before Halloween is here, they got Christmas stuff out. Our society is driven by consumerism. Our society is driven by stuff and by greed. We Christians should be different. We should be sacrificial givers. We should be those that are responsible with what we have, not craving more. A cute little video at the beginning, the two guys, the atheist and the Christian with a cell phone. Can the world tell us apart from themselves? Are we different? Are we greedy? Do we toot our own horns? So I think we do a lot of times. The love of money is the root of all evil. Scripture says it. Not money is the root of all evil. Love of money. Who do you love? God or mammon? Who do you love? God or money? As musicians come, as the altar is open, if you need to pray, if you need to lay down your greed, lay down your selfishness, and give back to God, do so. The altar's open. High Shoals Ministry in our community and helping those that need it most. Thank you so much, Lord, and we pray. Amen.